Most car lifts are an afterthought. Atlas Elite Lifts designs architecturally refined car lift systems for luxury homes, high-end condominiums, premium dealerships, and commercial spaces. No bulky industrial equipment, no compromise on design, just seamless integration and precision engineering that is so beautiful, it's Batcave ready. You truly have to see an Atlas to believe it. Visit www.atlaselitelifts.com today.
If you're thinking that you want to sell your business in the future, you have to structure your business so that it could be sold, right? And owner dependency is not a structure that allows for you to sell successfully. So the way that, like you mentioned, you have an owner of a, in our case, $50 million a year business that was so involved in everything that the company couldn't function without him. Well, if you want that business to thrive, that owner's got to be able to step away and focus on what they're good at, their entrepreneurial brain.
The great Mark Cuban once said, "Business happens over years and years. Value is measured in the total upside of a business relationship, not by how much you squeezed out in any one deal." And we couldn't agree more. This is the Business Development Podcast, based in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and broadcasting to the world. You'll get expert business development advice, tips and experiences, and you'll hear interviews with business owners, CEOs, and business development reps. You'll get actionable advice on how to grow business. Brought to you by Capital Business Development, capitalbd.ca. Let's do it. Welcome to the Business Development Podcast. And now your expert host, Kelly Kennedy.
Hello, welcome to episode 345 of the Business Development Podcast. And today, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome to our stage, Robert Welke. Robert is a business growth strategist, entrepreneur, certified exit planning advisor, author, and co-founder of MExit Inc. With more than 35 years of entrepreneurial and leadership experience across environmental services, financial advisory, and oilfield services, Robert has built, scaled, and advised companies through some of the most important stages of growth, transition, and value creation. He brings a rare combination of operational experience, financial insight, and real-world entrepreneurial perspective to the work of helping business owners build stronger, more scalable, and more transferable companies. As the co-creator of MExit Business Growth Transformation Platform, Robert helps owners and leadership teams reduce owner dependency, strengthen systems, develop high-performing teams, and create businesses capable of lasting beyond the founder. His work is rooted in a simple but powerful belief. A great business should not depend on one person to survive. It should be built with the people, processes, leadership, and discipline required to grow, transfer, and endure. Robert, it's an honor and a privilege to have you gracing our stage today.
Kelly, thank you very much. That was just too kind, that introduction.
Well, everybody says that, but the reality is you've been doing this for a long time.
For a while. Tell by my lack or thinness of hair, yes.
Yeah. I was going to say I'm 37. I lost mine 10 years ago, so I'm catching up.
Here we go.
That's all that hard work showing off. Yeah.
Exactly.
No, this is a really important conversation, Robert. I'm excited to have it with you today. When we first kind of got on and started chatting together, we haven't talked about exits much on this show. Mostly we're talking about building, but we're not always focused on the end goal. And I think the end goal of every business at some point is to sell and ride off into the sunset, hopefully. But we have a problem in Canada right now. And it was made, abundantly clear in my interview with Brianna Solberg of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business that Canada is in a bit of a hiccup. We're in something they are terming the entrepreneurial drought. And basically for 6 straight quarters in Canada, more businesses have been closing than opening. And one of the big challenges that was identified was that people are not selling their businesses. they are simply closing them.
Yeah.
And so I know we're going to touch on that today. We're going to, get into it. But I think we need to encourage some people to plan a little bit differently and maybe start thinking about how do we exit our businesses when the time is right. But before we do that, Robert, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you end up on this path? Were you always so entrepreneurial driven?
I'm going to say yes. I grew up in entrepreneurial family. My dad started his own construction company, and he was a general contractor. I was involved in building houses from the age of 7 on.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then I finished off my university degree in 1997 and came out to Alberta to start working for an oil and gas service company. That lasted for 5 years. And then after I left that company, another gentleman and I started a company. That was the environmental services company.
Okay.
So we grew that company from business plan through licensing, through compliance, through capital raises, to the point where we raised $10 million of private capital, got the business launched, secured the equipment, brought it into the province, secured our initial contracts, started doing the work, and then we went public. And because of my first experience in Alberta with a public company, I said, I'm not interested in pursuing that, and went off to do something else.
Yeah.
That something else was financial planning for 10 years. So I was in the financial services industry. And along that journey, of course, I worked with a lot of business owners because of my background. And one of them came to me in the early 2000s and said, hey, I'm about to start my own business and I want you to come join me.
Yeah.
So after a number of conversations, that ultimately came to fruition. I ended up selling my practice, started working with that gentleman and creating that new business. We grew that business to a pretty substantial size, over $5 million a year.
Wow.
And at one point, we had actually been approached by private equity to buy us out. Unfortunately, that deal fell apart only because the price of oil went into the toilet in early 2015.
Yeah.
So we continued running the business. My partner unfortunately succumbed to cancer about 2 years later. I ended up departing the business after his passing, and ended up looking at my next stage of life, which was how do I take all the things that I built and learned, and how do I apply that? So one of the things I came across was a number of studies about exits in Canada.
Yeah.
There's lots of research in the US, not a lot in Canada. When I started reading these reports, I became quite alarmed.
Yes.
The first one was an Ontario government study. The next one was BDC. And then, of course, the succession tsunami published by the Canadian Federation of Small Business, CFIB, Independent Business, was another one. And they all pointed to a common thread.
Yeah.
More business owners are looking to leave than there are looking to start businesses. And there's a problem because they're not sellable in most cases. The stats are really sad. 76% of Canadian business owners hope to exit in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
10% of business owners will be successful in selling their business.
Wow.
So there's a real disconnect there. There is substantial capital sitting on the sidelines looking for good businesses. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of good businesses to acquire, because it's not just buying the business because they've got a great client base. If you want to buy a business, there has to be a number of key elements that are working in that business in order for it to be sellable. And that's what we found. So we went down the path of securing our exit planning designation. It created a great framework for us to think about. And then as we started to look more deeply into this arena, we identified that there's no real playbook out there for this. Business owners are pretty much left to themselves to figure out how to do this.
Yeah.
So we decided that because my partner and I, whom I met in that interim time, we realized that without this playbook, it's going to be difficult for people to do this. So we said, how do we do this? So we went looking. We found all these toolboxes out there that were designed for helping business owners prepare for an exit. But what they did not address was the how do we do it? There's lots of what we need to do, but very little that was saying how we do it. So being the entrepreneurs that we are, see a need, fill a need, we went out and we said, let's build a playbook. Let's build a proper toolbox to walk a business owner through the process of getting the business prepared for an exit. And it ended up being much more, complicated is one way to describe it, but much more in depth and much more rigorous and comprehensive than we originally thought. because we found as we started to build this and as we started to continue as we continued our research, that there are tools out there to help a business owner get prepared for a number of things, how to be more operationally cohesive, more operationally disciplined, tools to help them understand what they need to do. But there wasn't a step-by-step, paint-by-numbers process to say, this is where you should start and this is where you need to end. And so that's what we attempted to build in our toolbox. And what came out of that was the Business Growth Transformation Program.
Amazing. Yeah, I know that, like, for me, I was kind of thrust into the realities of that when we interviewed the CFIB, actually.
Yeah.
And, I was kind of shocked. I hadn't really dug deep into, the state of business. And, I talked to so many entrepreneurs and so many of them are optimistic and life's great and we're, smooth sailing. But Canada specifically seems to be running into some serious challenges with regards to entrepreneurship. I'm actually concerned about the future of entrepreneurship in this country, period. Not just the sale of these businesses, but just, will young people start businesses?
Yeah.
Does it even make sense for them to take that risk? And the scary thing is that more entrepreneurs are starting to recommend that they don't. That they just get a job with the government or they get a job with, one of these large private corporations because they are more stable, and they're not necessarily wrong. In my mind, there hasn't been a lot of help or support for entrepreneurs in this country.
Well, part of the challenge is over the last 12 to 15 years, the regulatory environment around businesses and small businesses particularly has become more and more onerous, and it's become less attractive to create a business. I mean, the government closed a number of tax opportunities that were available, and that is driving people away from wanting to run a business because it's less attractive to do so.
100%.
Right?
It never ceases to amaze me how much money a small business has to generate just to exist. It's almost insane.
Yeah. Well, and also the tax, and also not just tax, but all the loopholes they have to go through just to stay in business, right?
Yeah.
So it's quite onerous to be a business owner these days, and if you're not prepared for that, it could be a challenge. That's why so many fail in the first 5 years.
Yeah. What was interesting from that report was that they were talking about the past 6 quarters, which fine. Past 6 quarters have been bad. That's fine. We can turn that around.
Yeah.
The problem that nobody really looked at was that this isn't a new trend.
No.
Canadian business has actually been going down since 1983, 84. And it has gone down significantly since that time.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's actually the more scary statistic, is that it's basically a complete downward trend of new businesses starting since about 1984.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I find potentially, it's the best word to describe it, as a potential offset to that, is that there is now a movement in Canada for what we call entrepreneurship through acquisition, which is, there's been a lot of effort, particularly in Alberta, put around how do we help young business owners acquire existing businesses rather than go and start a new business.
Yeah.
Because we have, as I said, 3 out of every 4 businesses in Canada is hoping to exit in the next 5 years, every business owner, right?
Significant.
Well, if that's the case, and you're in a smaller center, Stettler, Red Deer, Provost, Wainwright, Alberta, High River, the question becomes, okay, if 3 out of 4 businesses expect to be gone in 10 years, how do we keep those businesses in the community, keep the community vibrant by attracting people? And the only way to really do that is through acquisition. But this then lends back to the problem we were discussing before we went on air, which is, why are people not buying businesses and why are businesses not selling, right?
Yes.
And there's a number of reasons. Let's start with why they're not selling to start with. Part of it is, quite frankly, business owners don't even know sometimes that selling is an option. They're not aware that that could be an option. They're not aware that they could even sell to their employees, and there are tools out there to help them do that now.
Yeah.
They're not even aware that private equity might be interested in buying them, right? They don't think about strategic alliances and strategic partnerships with people to help them transition out of the business, right? These are all things they have no knowledge about, and nobody's giving them that knowledge. I mean, a big part of our process as exit planners when we talk to business owners is we say there is a whole myriad of options that you could choose from if and when you decide you wish to exit the business. Only one of them is shutting it down. There are a number of other ones that are out there that might be attractive to you. However, if you wish to go down the road of those other options, there is work that must be done in order for you to be successful in that. If you want to sell your company to your employees, you have to have a wholly different level of preparedness than if you want to sell your business to a competitor. Because the reality is, if you want to sell your business to your employees, they have to understand what it means to run a business. They have to have the ownership mentality, and they have to understand risk. If you're selling to a competitor, they already know that. So for them, it's an easier integration potentially than it is for you to sell to your employees, right? So there's all these different levels of preparedness that need to be considered depending on the option that you're looking for an exit.
Yeah. Bring me into, some of the companies that you're working with right now, right? Most of the organizations, I feel like by the time they're thinking they want to exit, they're hoping they can do it in a year, 2 years. But, I haven't had a lot of conversations on it, but what I have had for conversations basically said this is a long process.
Yeah. And this is something we like to explain to people, that exit planning is not an event. It is a process. And it is a process that is determined by the current readiness and attractiveness of the business. So if we're talking to a business owner, we need to go and we need to do a number of assessments. One of them is an opinion of value, right? What is it your business is currently worth? Because just because your buddy John sold his company in the same industry for X does not mean that you're worth X, right? So we need to have a reality check around that. The second is we need to have an understanding of what it is that you'd like to accomplish in terms of your exit. Do you need a certain minimum amount of money? Do you need a certain minimum? Is there some criteria around that, right? Another one is level of preparedness of the owner to exit, because in many cases, owners won't exit because they don't know what to do if they leave the business, so they just won't exit.
Yeah.
And that, in many cases, is what results in the business shutting down, right? And then the other question we need to look at, well, how attractive is the business and how ready is the business for an exit? Those are two separate conversations. Exit attractiveness, right, is what does that business look like to an outsider? Exit readiness is what does that business internally look like in order to be ready for an exit? So there are a number of things that have to be addressed. And in the exit planning arena, we tend to talk about what we call the the capitals of business, right? There's financial capital. Financial performance is a capital of the business, right?
Yeah.
The other four are what we call intangible capitals. And those intangible capitals are people, right? Human capital, structural capital. That's your IP, your systems, your processes, what accounting system you use. Do you have an ERP? All those tools and technologies.
Yeah.
Another is brand capital, social capital, we call it. What's your reputation? If you don't have a good reputation in the business marketplace, nobody's going to be interested in buying you.
Yeah.
And another one is what we call customer capital. How well diversified are your relationships and how strong are they? Because if your customers are transient or you have a high concentration of customers, that is perceived as risk by a buyer. Like if you have 30% of your business from one client and your margin is 17% or your profitability is 17% and you lose 30% of your business, that's going to significantly impact whether or not that business is viable. So, building a framework around helping them understand what they need to do to make that business both attractive and ready is really the conversations that need to be had. And then, of course, the next conversation is, are you prepared to do it?
Yeah. Yes. It sounds like some of those things are maybe a little bit hard to measure.
Oh, they are. Yeah, they're not easy. But there are some metrics you can use. For example, we recommend that nobody has one customer that represents more than 15% of their their total revenue.
Okay.
Right? There's a metric you could use and something you can use. That's realistic.
Yeah.
When you're talking about people, it's all about role clarity. It's all about right people in the right seats. It's all about making sure you've got all your bases covered, and then making sure that you have standard operating procedures and processes that are not owned specifically by the owner, right? That they're distributed among the leadership team. The other part of the human capital piece is it actually a team? Do they operate and function as a team? Do they have a discipline that they use to execute on? Do they have a process that they follow to maintain that discipline and maintain the momentum of the company without the owner being there?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the key word, right? Without the owner being there.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of Canadian companies are struggling because the owners are very involved in pretty much everything.
Yes. But the reality is they don't have to be.
Mm-hmm.
They do it because they hoard information and they don't want people to know what's going on. But what we have found is when you start to tell people what you want to occur and you give them the goals that you have for your business, they will engage and they will get involved.
Yes.
Our best performing clients that we work with, the leadership team is absolutely clear on financial metrics in the company, on what the objective is, what the strategic plan is, because they help build it, right? That engagement is critical because if you don't have the people in the company helping to build the plan for the company, then they're not going to be engaged in the plan.
How important is the structure of your organization in the sale of this business? Hey, rock stars, quick pause here. If you're anything like me, you've probably dreamed about owning your own business most of your life. The Revolution hybrid vacuum from Hypervac Technologies is a portable duct cleaning system that fits right in the back of your truck or van, giving you a real opportunity to launch your own duct cleaning business starting at under 7,000 Canadian dollars. Visit www.hypervac.com to learn more. Thanks, Hypervac. Let's get back to the show.
It all depends on the nature of the business, right? So you've got to make sure that it's operationally sound and that all the bases are covered. But every business is different and they have different structures. When it comes to corporate structure, like the way that you set your business up, that has an impact on what's going to happen at the sale as well. If you've got a holding company or a family trust or just the operating company, all of those have different impacts on the results that you're going to get when you sell the business, and also will dictate some of the options that are available to you.
Bring me into some of the things that you see when you walk into an organization and you see that maybe it's a little bit too reliant on the founder itself. What are some maybe like red flags that if anybody's listening and they are trying to get to a place where they can sell, that they can start to work on a few key areas?
Okay. First thing we see is the owner says, I cannot take a vacation, or I can't be away for more than 10 days or 12 days at a time because I have to be here for payroll. That's a function that can be delegated. It's a function that you can empower people to do. But that, again, that engenders trust. You've got to have people that you trust. So if they're not able to take that time off, then the first thing they need to do is build a team that can actually do that and engage the right people for that. Another one is inconsistency in performance, quality, right? Have you got standards for quality? Do you have an actual delivery process mapped out so everybody knows how things are supposed to work and who's supposed to be involved at what stage? So process mapping is an important part of what we do as well because it helps highlight, this person needs to be involved at this stage or else they're not going to be successful in delivering what they need to deliver on. So those are all little things that are giveaways. And again, the other one is inconsistent revenue, right? Who's doing the selling?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, a lot of the times it is the founders, right? It is the founders managing these relationships.
Yeah.
I know with a lot of the clients that I work with, especially on the service-based side, they are really the piece, the glue holding these companies together. It's the founding team. Yeah. And, it hasn't really mattered, Rob, whether it's been $1 billion organizations in some cases or small mom and pop startups.
Yeah.
I've seen it at all levels.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that and we spoke to this in our last conversation, plus prior to starting the taping today, but one of the things that's important is if you're thinking that you want to sell your business in the future, you have to structure your business so that it could be sold, right? And owner dependency is not a structure that allows for you to sell successfully. So the way that, like you mentioned, you have an owner of in our case, $50 million a year business that was so involved in everything that the company couldn't function without him. Well, if you want that business to thrive, that owner's got to be able to step away and focus on what they're good at, their entrepreneurial brain, and delegate all of the other activities in the company to people that have earned the right to run that business that he has either mentored or we have mentored, so that he doesn't have to worry about the minutiae. He doesn't have to worry about the day-to-day.
I think what we're struggling with here, though, is belief systems, right?
Yes.
Because it's pretty clear that that owner, whoever they are, no matter the size of the company, believes that they have to be involved from A to Z, or it's not going to work properly. So I imagine some of the challenges that you must run into when you're going in and you're working with these companies, I guess some of them hopefully are coming to you with an open mind because they're like, okay, obviously we need some help here. But, talk to me a little bit about some of the ones you might go into where you're running into resistance, because I imagine you do run into resistance.
Oh, we do.
And I think a lot of it is, like you said, these people have been in their organizations for a long time. Doesn't really matter. The size of the company could be massive, but they've been involved for so long in so many different things that letting go of some of those things is very hard for them. What are some of the false beliefs maybe you keep running into?
Before I get into that, I'm going to suggest to you that the reason in many cases that the owner is acting that way is because it's a learned behavior. Is because as they were growing their business, they found or had people work for them that they couldn't rely on. So then that kept falling back on them to do it. So if you have learned this behavior that I can't trust the people below me, it's really difficult to change that behavior.
Yeah.
But if you go in with the mindset of, if I find the right people, I don't have to worry about doing this. That's the shift. So speaking to your question about running into companies, we had a company we started working with a couple of years back where the owner recognized he had to make a change because he needed to sell the business.
Yeah.
It wasn't a nice to have. It was a need. He needed to sell that business. Okay. That was going to be his source of capital for his family's future. But there was a challenge. The other part of the equation to that is recognizing that you need to do something. The corollary to that is that you have a willingness to do it. So one of the things that we find with many business owners is, while they recognize they need to do something, they're unwilling to change. So one of the big things for us is, and we suss this out fairly quickly when we're talking to business owners, are you willing to change? Mm-hmm. Because in that case, we went down the road with that business owner for about 10 months before it became patently obvious that he did not want to change. He was not willing to let go. He was micromanaging and undermining everything we were doing behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And if you're not prepared to make the change and step away and allow it to happen and empower your people to learn to run the business, then there's no way that you're going to be successful. So we ended up walking away from that client.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Does that happen often for you guys, or typically
2 out of the last 15 that we've worked with?
So it not statistically a majority, but enough to still be significant.
Yeah. It's still, if you think about that, that's, let's say 8% of business owners, there's 8% of your 80%, right?
Yeah.
Or 76%.
How do you handle it when so much of the brand is tied to a person, right? Like, I'm a really great example of this, actually.
Yeah.
So with my brand, Capital Business Development, the Business Development Podcast, my advertising services, I used to work there. All of those things are tied to me very strongly in a way that is very hard to separate.
Yeah.
Obviously, long term, if I want to sell this business, I am going to have to figure that out. But I think you're seeing a lot of businesses, especially in the age of social media, starting to really become built around a person as opposed to a corporation.
Which gets back to that comment I made about the difference between building for one type of business versus building for a business that's sellable.
Yeah.
If you recognize very early on as you're building your business that it cannot be tied to the owner specifically, then you build it so that it's not tied to the owner specifically. So for example, in my last company, we did not use the owner's names in the company name at all. And the brand was the name of the company. And everything we did supported that brand rather than any individual within that brand. So we were able to distribute all the different things that needed to get done in the business to the people that were the best suited to delivering on that, so that we could actually build a company and not a lifestyle business. So see, a lot of challenges that I have with many businesses is the owner starts the business because he's really good at what he does. People say to him, you should go off on your own. The guy you're working for, he's not treating you well enough, or the individual themselves realize I could do this better myself, which is usually what happens, right?
Yeah.
They say, you know what, I don't like the way he's doing it. I think I can do it better. So I'm going to go. So they do. They start that business. But then they go down one of two paths. First path is they grow the business, they hire people, but they're still involved in the business. And then they start living their lifestyle based on the results of that business. So they put their truck in the business, their big, beefy, gigantic, stepped up truck.
Yeah.
They put their boat in the business. They put all these different things in the business. And then that becomes intertwined with the business and makes it really difficult for you to step away and disentangle yourself from the business. The other way that you can do it is, which is the way my partner and I did it, was we said, we're going to take a reasonable salary. We're not going to own the business is not going to buy our personal assets. We are going to grow this business and put everything back in the business, hire people to run certain things, and we are going to grow this business so that it becomes a $20 million a year business. And we made that decision before I even landed with him to do that.
Wow.
Right? So that was the objective from the very beginning. And to do that, you have to work backwards and say, okay, what do I need to have in place to make that happen? I need to have systems, processes, people. I need to have a rigorous growth mechanism and all those kinds of things that we had to do, and systems and processes to manage everything as we grew so it didn't blow us up.
Yeah.
So we were very conscious about growing business at a deliberate rate and reinvesting back in the business, and we didn't grow too fast. In the first 5 years we did business, we turned more business away every year than we actually did.
Wow.
But that was deliberate because we built a foundation. When we were approached for somebody to come and buy us, when they did their deep dive, they looked at us and they were quite frank in the boardroom with us. They said, you guys have built systems here that $40 million enterprise value businesses don't even have.
Wow.
So kudos to you guys, right?
Yeah.
So we were thinking that way. We were systems thinking before we even grew the business.
How were you? I guess the thing is that most people don't think that far ahead. What was it specifically with you that made you consider all those things in the very beginning? Because I feel like most people are like, well, we don't know what's going to happen. Let's just wing it and see how good we do. Hopefully it works out. Might not, but most people are not thinking about 20 years down the line when they launch their business.
Well, ironically, there's two pieces to that answer. One is me and my first 3 businesses that I started, right? Understanding how important process was.
Yeah.
And the second was that my partner started building this business in his mind 10 years before he quit his job to start this business. Right? Wow. So he was thinking about all the operational things he needed to do. What he didn't have was the administrative, financial, and people pieces that I had that I brought to the table.
Yeah. Yeah. So honestly, experience.
Yeah.
You had this magic thing called experience that most entrepreneurs don't have.
They call that an overnight success. Just took 20 years to get there.
Yeah, 20-year overnight success. Exactly. Yeah. No, that's amazing. I love that. And like I said, it's come up before. I want to say there was a company that came up. Oh, goodness. It's going to bug me because I know what it is. But it's a Canadian media company that basically was founded with the idea. I interviewed them about a couple of years ago. And they were mentioning that they had launched the business with the idea of selling it. I want to say that has come up once, maybe twice, in nearly 400 episodes of this show. So it just goes to show, it is not typically a consideration at the launch of a business on how do we structure this for a proper exit.
Right. And I think that is a failing of our entrepreneurial ecosystem in my mind, right?
Yeah.
As I mentioned, one of the things that I find with a lot of business owners is they are great at what they do.
Yeah.
They're experts at their craft. You know what they're not great at? Understanding the business of business. And an important aspect of a business, understand the importance of the business of business is, if you want a business, it has to be sellable. Right? That is the outcome of you starting a business. Because if the whole point of your business is just to grow it and shut it down, there's no legacy there. That just shows to me that you were thinking more about yourself than the people that have brought you along with this. And what we find with a lot of the small business owners that we work with, they care a lot about their people.
Yeah.
So that legacy is an important piece. They don't bring people on because they want to resource extract them. They bring people on because they want to help them and build a career for them. Right?
Yeah.
And if you're building a career for them, isn't the ultimate goal that, hey, there's a career for them after I'm gone?
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
unfortunately, that realization comes too late for a lot of business owners.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of solopreneurs out there as well, too, where just like the cost of scaling is so astronomical.
Yeah.
Like I said, like Canada itself is not really exactly the most friendly business environment at the moment. So I know there's a lot of, I know a lot of founders who are solopreneurs and they're just doing the best they can with what they have. They don't really have I think they would want to scale if the right economic conditions presented themselves. But I think many of the times they're just trying to pay themselves and keep their business going, right? And I know that there's that side of it too. What would you say to those people, right? Like the solopreneurs out there who maybe they are ambitious, maybe they do want to get to a point, but like they're not really seeing a way to get there.
Well, there's two things I'd say. First of all, really know yourself first, right? Are you interested in adult daycare? Because if you're prepared to run an adult daycare, then you're prepared to scale, right? But if you don't want the headache of people and payroll and all those things, focus on growing your business to meet your personal needs and make sure that you save enough money so that you can just close down and walk away at the end of the day.
Is that the only option available to those people, or is there a way to successfully exit?
No, that's why I said know yourself. If you're interested in growing, then start thinking about what that looks like and go out and find the resources to help you do that. We have this really cool tool out there called artificial intelligence.
Really cool.
That has been really reshaping in our minds the way even we do business, right?
Yeah.
And an important piece of that is ask it, if I want to grow my business, what are the steps that I need to do?
Yeah.
Right? And listen to those steps, think about those steps, and determine whether or not you're prepared to make those steps.
Obviously, growth is a long-term vision, right? Like, I mean, we're talking, solopreneurs today could have a $20 million thriving business 10 years from now.
Absolutely.
I think sometimes it's very hard for them to see that far ahead because there's a lot of luck involved in business too. There's a lot of strategy, but there's also a lot of luck. And so sometimes you can't see the opportunity before it walks through your door. I know for me, my crystal ball has been broken most of my career.
Yep.
Still, we're fortunate, but I haven't, a lot of the successes that have come my way, I didn't plan them. I got lucky, truthfully, and I put in the work.
Yeah, there is that. But there's something else that I suggest is that, like Stephen Covey says in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, begin with the end in mind.
Yeah.
If you're going out to start your own company, what is the objective of your company? Do you want to be the dominant force in your industry? That's different than being, hey, I just want to make enough money to get by.
Yeah.
So that's why I say know yourself.
I know for me, I wanted to make an impact in the world far beyond, what I could do as an employee. That was just the truth for what I wanted to do. And I hoped that somewhere along the way, I would make enough to get by and hopefully thrive at some point as well. Yeah. And I'll be honest, I've accomplished pretty much all those things so far, and we're still on that goal. But, like I said, I think with the advent of AI, I used to think like 5-year and 10-year plans made a lot of sense. But honestly, after interviewing hundreds of people, nobody can see 5 years ahead now.
Even in our case, when we talk to business owners, the most we go out is 3 years because nobody can predict beyond 90 days, quite frankly.
It's insane, right? Like just the advancement of technology, AI in 2028 is going to be 1,000 times more powerful than it was the first time I tried it in 2023.
Right.
I have no idea what that looks like, but it sounds unbelievable, and it probably will be.
But again, I'm going to go back to that comment I made, begin with the end in mind, right? We pick a 3-year time horizon because people can see 3 years out. It's not really airy-fairy. But we don't focus on that. We said, what do you think you'd like to be in 3 years? Then we go to, okay, in the next 12 months, what do we need to do in the next 12 months to get us on the path to hit that 3-year goal? And then we break it down into 90-day sprints. What can we do in 90 days to move the needle to get us to where we can get to where we want to be by the end of the year? And that's how you execute. But again, it's a discipline that most business owners don't have. And their teams don't have.
I forget the statistic, but I interviewed Monty Pedersen, who is he basically does, what is it? Execution strategies. Yeah. And he was talking about how like it was stupid, the amount of essentially plans that are unexecuted on. Like it is significant. I want to say like 60%, 60 to 70% of plans are never executed.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that because my partner used to work for a big consulting house. And the way he describes it is, I used to do strategic planning to people.
To them, yeah?
I'll go in, spend 6 months learning your company, identifying opportunities. I'll write this wonderful, great report, give it to you, and you never use it, right?
Yeah.
So the way that we engage in our process, that we deliberately built it this way, was that the team that we're working with has to be taught how to build a strategic plan first. Then we have to help them build their strategic plan, and then they have to determine what their next steps would be. And our job is just to coach them to make sure that they are actually staying on track with what they said they were going to do.
Yeah.
So the way I describe the program that we built is we teach, right? We go in and we teach you a skill. Then we mentor you on how to apply that skill specific to your business. And then we coach you to make sure you execute on the skill based on what you want to do with it, right? So our process is quite rigorous. I don't want to speak too much about our process, but it's quite rigorous and it's accountability. That's what it's all about. And what Harvard did some research on accountability and business plans, and what they found was that owner-led change never holds to the level that it needs to be. In fact, up to 80% of it never gets executed, whereas third-party coached change does in fact get traction. It just takes longer to get that traction. But once it gets the traction, you have a J curve.
Yeah, and it makes sense too, because you guys have experienced all the problems, whereas a business owner may only be experiencing that problem for the very first time. And so having somebody who's already been through it multiple times with many different companies can say, oh yeah, this happens all the time, don't worry about it. Where an owner might be like, this is the end.
Yeah. Well, and then there's another point too, which is the owner's all excited about this new project and he gets the team all excited about it. And then 6 weeks down the road, the team's going, no, the owner's not interested anymore. And so why should we be interested?
Yeah.
But there's another piece on the third party coaching piece that is more important. And that is, as a coach, I will hold the owner accountable.
Yes.
The team can't hold the owner accountable until they learn how to hold the owner accountable. And the only way they learn that is through a guy like me who's holding the owner accountable.
And you've spent a lot of time today talking about the employees. And I think one of the interesting things that you hit on right in the beginning was employee acquisition of a company. I don't think that's something many business owners were considering. I think many times they're thinking a competitor is going to buy me out or it's going to be private equity. But I know when we talked, that was something that I found really interesting. Talk to me a little bit about employee acquisition of a company.
Okay, so there's a number of ways that an employee can acquire the company. Great employees, generally, if the business owner is, really open to it, he will allow employees to buy shares in the company as they grow. That's one way, right? Put in an employee stock ownership program of some kind. So that's one way to do it. And you can formalize that and part of that is to help reward the employees for their due diligence and their loyalty, et cetera. So that's one. In many cases, however, the owner looks at it and goes, well, these employees will never be able to afford buying out my shares. So that's why it becomes a prohibitive exercise for most business owners. Their business is worth $5 million. The employees own 10%. How are they going to come up with $4.9 million, right?
Sure.
Or $4 million bucks. So there are ways to do that now that weren't available a little while ago. Another way is through the employee ownership trust, where the business owner actually sells 51% or more of the business directly to a trust that is established where the employees are all beneficiaries of the trust. So it is a separate entity, the trust, that buys the shares, not the employees directly. And that trust manages the employee's ownership of that business as their representative, so to speak, right?
Okay.
So they're managing it on behalf of the employees. The employees aren't making operational decisions. There still is an operations team that does that, but the trust is making sure that the company is not doing anything bad that's going to jeopardize the value of that business for the employees, right? So that there's a number of mechanisms, a number of ways that can be done, and that is a fairly new program in Canada. And what that makes it quite attractive in Canada is just literally within the last month, the federal government has extended and made permanent the $10 million capital gains exemption for business owners who sell their personally held shares to an employee ownership trust.
Wow.
So not only do they get their regular, $1.3 million capital gains exemption that most of them have already used, right?
Yeah.
They actually get up to $10 million capital exempted when they sell to an employee ownership trust.
Okay.
So lots of conditions that have to be in place for that to be successful. Don't want to go into that now, but as I mentioned earlier, there's different levels of preparedness depending on who you want to sell to. Selling to an employee ownership trust is one of the highest levels of preparedness that you have to have.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So it's not the easiest way to do this.
No.
But is it a preferred way to do it?
For many business owners, they think it is.
Yeah.
Right. And it is a good way to do it, quite frankly, because it does allow the employees and the communities to retain that business.
Yeah.
As opposed to, say, a private equity firm that comes in, buys the business, then restructures the business for maximum profitability, and then exits the neighborhood. Like they move the company to a better location or whatever, and then the entire community is impacted. Employee ownership trust really are good because they keep that business in the community.
Yeah.
Right.
So what you're saying is the government is trying to enact things to make that an easier choice.
An attractive choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas it was not we didn't even have an employee ownership trust 4 years ago. That wasn't even an option.
Okay.
Right? That was enabled through legislation 3 years ago. And they did have the capital gains exemption as part of that, but it wasn't a permanent exemption. It was supposed to sunset December 31st of this year. Just 4 weeks ago, the government actually extended it to permanent for that $10 million capital gains exemption. But employee ownership trusts have been in use since the 70s in the U.S. and in the mid 2000s in Europe, right?
Yeah.
Particularly the UK. So they are a viable tool, and they're a great way to keep the businesses and distribute that business to the employees who have helped build that business, and the owner does get paid, right?
Okay.
Right? Because it's a third party. In some cases, it's a third party that provides the capital to make that happen. But no bank is going to lend money unless it's a solid company to begin with.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. So yeah, it all comes down to how are you preparing your organization to be sold, regardless of how you plan to sell it.
Exactly.
You have listed a few different ways that people can sell their businesses.
Yep.
Obviously, they could be bought by a competitor.
Yep.
They could be bought by venture capital or private equity,
Yep.
or they could be sold via an employee ownership trust.
Yep.
Or just different ways that employees can acquire the company.
Yep.
Is there a preferred way? Is there a good, better, best way to sell your business?
No, it really depends on what the objective of the owner is.
Okay.
Right. At the end of the day, they have got to be prepared for whatever decision they make. And they got it. It really, at the end of the day, it really boils down to their personality and their character, right?
Yeah.
We had a company that we were working with that initially thought that an employee ownership trust might be a great option, but after they went through the initial conversations around it, they ended up saying, "No, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to keep it in the family, and I'm just going to pay my people really well."
Yeah.
Right. And because he does have family members that are in the business. And they have now proved that they can help run the business. Because prior to that, when we first started work, the owner wasn't sure whether or not the children were capable of running the business.
Mm-hmm.
But we have now showed him through the work that we've done that they are very capable.
Interesting. So in a situation like that, where maybe no money per se is changing hands to a new organization, but we're going to hand it to our kids, or we're going to make that kind of transition, that's also something that you work in.
Yeah. Not as much, but yes.
Okay.
There's a lot of family-owned businesses out there that pass from generation to generation.
Sure.
Where the value that we bring is we actually can ensure that the team that you've got is capable of running the business into the next generation. So we help build the teams that make it successful as part of our process.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Bring me into the length of the term of which we should be planning this sale of our business, right? We talked about it a little bit earlier on where most people are like, oh crap, I got to sell this thing in a year or 2 years and we haven't thought about it. And now we are in trouble because this is not a 1 to 2 year process. What is a realistic length of time to sell a business, given that everything goes right? And we know that doesn't happen very often either.
Right. If you're going to be intentional about getting ready, 3 to 5 years. And the reason I say that is the first year of getting ready is really all about understanding what needs to be done, right? And getting that process going. If there are anything to do if there's anything that requires any corporate restructuring or any legal work associated with the way the company is set up, that triggers some timelines that must be met before the business can sell and take advantage of the tax opportunities, right? And quite frankly, it takes anywhere between 24 to 36 months to actually instill and anchor the disciplines that need to be anchored to grow the business to where you need it to be. And then you want at least a year or 2 years after that to A, settle the time requirements that Revenue Canada has around restructuring, and B, to take advantage of all the things that you built to make sure you get the best value out of it.
Yeah. Okay.
So we generally say 3 to 5 years.
And probably closer to 5.
Yeah. But it's got to be, that's if you're intentional.
Yeah.
Right? That's if you're actually going to dig in and do the work.
Yeah. And obviously, it's not exactly a little amount of work, right? Once we bring in a team like yours, it's going to be steady work probably for that 3 to 5 years.
Exactly.
Are there any situations where it might run longer?
Yes. In fact, I have one where the timeline on the business that I'm working with in this particular case, his time horizon is 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And he brought me in initially just as a business coach.
Yeah.
And then as we evolved that relationship, we identified and created a whole new strategic plan to grow that business into a significant entity. And he just wants me there and has engaged my services to make sure that we keep him on track with that.
Okay.
So we're giving him the deliverables. We're giving him the objectives they need to accomplish. We're holding him accountable. We're doing the trainings and stuff with his team.
Okay. If you're talking to a newer organization, let's say that we got an organization listening right now, they're somewhere between 3 and 5 years old. They're really just got their feet. They've got some revenue coming in, maybe for the first time, some steady, stable revenue. They're growing. They know the trajectory is great, but they haven't thought about this yet. What are some things they can start doing right now to start preparing their organization for an eventual sale?
First of all, make sure you've got the right people in the right seats, feet, and they're facing the right direction. How do you do that? Well, there's an assessment you can do for that, right? Making sure that everybody has role clarity, because as a company grows, roles begin to blur. People start doing stuff they shouldn't be doing, and it's not high value. Having a discipline around making decisions and keeping decisions, like building an operational discipline. There are toolboxes out there that could do that. There's other coaching services that will do that kind of thing to get the team aligned to grow. Yeah. The biggest challenge is helping them understand that growing a business for a future sale and even for success 20 years down the road requires systems, processes, and tooling up that most people don't know, right?
Yes.
You learn the hard way in most cases. That's why after 30 years, a lot of business owners have been successful, but they've been successful, quite frankly, despite themselves.
Yeah.
And if you want to short circuit that, do the kind of work that we do. Have somebody do the kind of work that we do with your team.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Is there anything that really concerns you about what the next 15 or 20 years of business in Canada could be like? I know, like for me, when I heard the CFIB report that more businesses were closing than opening, that more businesses were just being shut down in general as opposed to being sold, that more entrepreneurs were being told, you might not want to go down this path. I know that really had me worried. Was there anything specifically that you have seen that has concerned you? And if so, what's something that could be done to maybe turn it around?
Okay. The thing that concerns me the most from all the research I've done is the fact that 3 out of every 4 businesses plans to exit in the next 10 years. I look at the knock-on consequences of that. So let's use Stettler, Alberta. They have 4 small manufacturing firms in Stettler, Alberta, each of them with 25 people in them. Okay. You now have 200 people or 100 people working in Stettler in manufacturing.
Yes.
3 out of 4 shut down. You now only have 25 people working in Stettler in manufacturing. Maybe you absorb some of the new people and you get up to 50 people again because, the opportunities there's work. But you know what? That's only half the economic value that was there before. And that means those other 50 people are out of work looking for work. And if they can't find work, they've got to move out. If they move out, what does that do to the community? Price of homes go down. Tax base goes down. The community starts to suffer as a whole because there's not enough economic and activity in the town to support the town. So I look at it and go, it's going to be the hollowing out of communities across Canada.
It's not a business issue. It's a full-on community and economic issue.
Absolutely. This is not just a single business issue. This is a community issue.
Yeah.
We've got to solve this problem. And that's why when we built our program, we said our goal is to impact 10,000 businesses. Why? Because people have not been doing it right for the last 50 years, and we need to get this right.
With that, let's head into MExit. What are your services and what kind of companies can you help?
Okay, so let's talk about MExit itself. MExit was formed around the idea that business owners need a better way to prepare themselves to get ready for sale. That was the primary driver for forming MExit. How do we do that? Is we built a framework that's rigorous based on best practices that are out there. All we did was consolidate them and build it into a timeline and a structure that is logical to take a business owner from where they're at today to where they need to be. Okay. Along with that, because we are exit planners as well, we have a different metric to measure how successful we are. Our metric is not revenue growth or profitability, it's enterprise value. Because at the end of the day, what gets sold is what's going to be in the owner's pocket, not how much profit he made, right?
Yes.
So we need to figure out what is the value that this company needs to be at for you to be successful. So around that, we have tools that we use, readiness assessments, attractiveness assessments, opinion of value assessments, and understanding the value drivers in the business to actually figure out what levers that we need to pull in order to make that business more valuable at the end of the day. So our focus is on enterprise value, not necessarily on revenue. Because I'll tell you something, I can show you a business that's doing $3 million a year in revenue, but if they're not firing on all 5 cylinders, they're only worth 1/10 of what they could be worth. And if we fix those other things, we could make that business 3 or 4 or 5 times more valuable.
And profit and revenue are two different things.
Exactly. Right?
Yeah.
And the other thing too is what we call exit readiness, right? Because if you're not exit ready, there's risk associated with the sale of that business. If we make it so your business is what we consider best in class in your industry, then that attracts a higher multiple because there's less concerns from an owner about what's going to happen. There's systems, processes, predictability, transferability. All that stuff is there that's not there with a business that's not set up for that. So getting to best in class is what our focus is, driving the business to best in class.
Love it.
So that's what we did. We built this toolbox over the years. We continue to evolve that toolbox and grow that toolbox because even though we've laid out a 24-month timeline, we have somewhere between 65 and 80 workshops that we can deliver to the business owner and their teams to help them make their business more successful. We just chose the 24 that made most sense as an additive pieces to grow the business to where it needs to be.
Amazing. And Robert, you're based in Canada. Are all of your services available across Canada? And we actually are talking internationally. So are some of those services potentially available to the United States as well?
I'm going to say potentially yes. And the reason I say that is because my partner and I are just the two of us at MExit that built this.
Yeah.
We spent the last 6 years essentially proving this methodology up. And we are now looking for advisors out there who are interested in delivering this kind of toolbox to clients in their local communities. So our focus is actually on existing advisory firms, mostly mid-sized accounting firms that want to have the clients that go, hang on, we need to get this business ready for sale. Here's how we can help you do that. So we've been licensing our toolbox to those firms, teaching them how to use it.
Okay.
And getting that across the country. So we're in conversations with people from Quebec all the way to Victoria in terms of how could we help you grow an advisory practice in your business to make this happen.
Amazing. And then what about the United States?
Oh, we're interested in going down there as well, but we want to get established in Canada first.
Okay, perfect. And if people are hearing this and they want to get a hold of you, they want to hire at MExit, they want to start this process, what is the best way for them to do so?
One of 2 ways. One is to reach out to us through our webpage, right? We have an information email there, or they can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn.
All of the links for the website, for Robert on LinkedIn, they're all going to be in the show notes. Give them a follow, reach out. Robert, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope I presented some valuable information.
Hundreds of episodes, Robert. This has come up a couple times max. So I think it's incredibly valuable. So thank you for your work. I hope that you are extremely successful.
Oh, thank you.
We make Canada a thriving business land again.
That's my hope. That's why I'm here.
Absolutely. Until next time, you've been listening to the Business Development Podcast, and we will catch you on the flip side.
This has been the Business Development Podcast with Kelly Kennedy. Kelly has 15 years in sales and business development experience within the Alberta oil and gas industry and founded his own business development firm in 2020. His passion and his specialization is in customer relationship generation and business development. The show is brought to you by Capital Business Development, your business development specialists. For more, we invite you to the website at www.capitalbd.ca. See you next time on the Business Development Podcast.
For industries like mining, forestry, construction, and energy, downtime is not just frustrating, it's expensive. For more than 55 years, Thunder Bay Hydraulics has helped keep critical equipment running through expert hydraulic cylinder repair and manufacturing. With in-house engineering, precision machining, and decades of real-world experience, they solve complex hydraulic challenges that most shops simply cannot handle. Their mission is simple: a relentless pursuit of zero downtime. Learn more at www.thunderbayhydraulics.com.